I'm delighted to be joined here on the Celtic Exchange today by Phil Differ, a man synonymous with Scottish comedy and particularly with the comedic side of Scottish football. Phil's perhaps best known to many as the creator of Only an Excuse, but he's also worked on some of the very best known Scottish comedy shows of all time, including Scotch Rye, Rab C Nesbitt, City Lights, Chewing the Fat and Still Game. Phil, welcome along to the show. An impressive roll call there, but what best describes you over the years? Is it writer, producer, playwright, stand-up?
Writer. I think that's the thing that in my vain world, I think that's what I'm best at. Some people would probably disagree with that, but that's the thing I enjoy doing. That's what got me into it all. So I'm writer. That's my biggest title, if you like, you know.
And in terms of just where it all started, Phil, so we'll obviously get on to talk about your comedy writing soon and how that's tied into your love of football, Scottish football, and in turn your love of Celtic, and we'll get to that. A good place to start though may be one of your earliest writings, a piece called Lost, if I've got that right, something you wrote in high school. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Oh God, aye. Jings, where did you get that?
I do my research, Phil.
It was actually an essay. I had Celtic versus Leeds in 1970 semi-final European Cup, and I'd got separated from my uncle at the game because there was 400 million people at that game, you know. And when we came out, I got separated, and the Lost was an essay about the panic. I was 14 at the time, and I wrote this about a year later, and I'd get the panic that set in when I realised that I didn't know where I was, and I was in this dark bit of Glasgow outside Hampden Park trying to find my uncle and trying to get everyone back together again. And I wrote that, I think it was my O-level prelim, and Miss Patrick said it was almost the perfect essay. And I suppose you think, maybe I could do this, you know. But God, that's right. Aye.
I think you got 100% mark for it.
I did. That's true. I got 100%, and it was like, you know, completely. When you write stuff, you just think, well, I hope that's good, and you know, you send it in the audience or whoever your audience is, their reaction decides whether it's been a good one or a bad one. But that, to get 100%, that was it. So I've been downhill ever since.
Did you get the vibe at that time, at that age, you say 14, that writing might be something for you, or did you? Were you in that world at that time where the chat was get a real job? Was there any prospect of earning a living through writing?
There's a significant moment for me. I liked being the clown. I liked the attention that you got when people laughed at you. And when I was getting brought up in Kilsyth, I think all villages and towns across Scotland, the guy in the town who had the latest joke, somebody go, he heard the one about XYZ, you know. There was a kudos about that they had a kind of standing in the community. You know, you need a new joke. Tam was the guy that told you the new joke. So I always kind of liked the idea of having been a gags man and getting that reaction. But one Saturday morning, I must have been about 7 or 8, maybe a wee bit older, and I was getting sent for the butcher meat on a Saturday morning, or the mince and all that kind of thing. And I met a guy called Joe Glover in Kilsyth, and Joe had a copy of The Valiant, which is a comic, and there was a wee cartoon in it, and Joe had written it. It was a wanted poster with a cowboy looking at a wanted poster, and it says wanted $10,000, and he's looking at the picture in the poster as like an older version of him, and the punchline is, and I thought my paw was worthless, right? He's worth 10,000. It's a rotten joke. Joe probably nicked it from somewhere, but it said J. Glover, Kilsyth. So I saw his name in print, and it said, a wee starting, it said £1. And Joe says, I've won £1. So I thought, seeing your name in lights, if you like, and getting paid for it, albeit £1, which was a lot of money back then. And that definitely was a moment that something clanged, and I thought about that. What a great job that would be. And then you file it away. You don't ever think anything's going to happen. And years later, circumstances change and you get that opportunity.
Whatever became of J. Glover, Kilsyth writing career, did it?
Joe didn't write. Joe's a lovely guy. Joe passed away a few years ago. I think that was Joe. I think Joe peaked at that. I think he was a mercenary. I think Joe was just doing it for the pound. Once he got the pound, that was him, you know.
We'll get back to the writing just very shortly, Phil, but what about your own fledgling football career as a young guy? A goalkeeper to trade, if I'm right. Did I hear you played a bit of football with Andy Murray's dad?
Aye, Willie. The Murrays lived up the road from me. They're cracking players. William Robert was my class, and Gordon, and they were really good players. William was a really exceptional player. And when we moved to St Pat's in Kilsyth, was a new school, and it was right next to a play park where you played football. You just put jumpers for goalposts or that kind of, or bricks for goalposts. So that's how brave we were, mental we were. And I remember the first going home, and these guys are set up and they're playing football, and I'd never kicked a ball. I must have been about 6, 7. I hadn't kicked a ball, and I get picked last, and we ran about, and I just couldn't dribble, couldn't trap it, couldn't do anything. Robert Murray, William they could do everything, I couldn't do anything. But I fell in love with it. I can't explain it any other way. I fell in love with the game. I just loved it, and I wanted to be good at it. So from that moment on, it was just practice, and everything I did was about making sure there was time to play football and to do that. And I was originally, everybody just wants to be a centre forward, as it was, and they score goals. But thanks to Ronnie Simpson, I just wanted to. I used to watch Ronnie Simpson. The ball be up the other end, and I'm watching Ronnie Simpson pacing and concentrating. All these, I just thought, that's what I want to be. I want to be a goalkeeper.
Yeah, and I know Ronnie Simpson was a big inspiration, and we'll get to the Lions and a lot of that just a bit later on. Well, a bit of luck though, I hear that you could have been the next Billy Bremner. I was lucky enough last year to see your show, Billy Bremner and Me. Tell us a wee bit about that one.
It was a one-man show thing. It was about my failures. How I became, how I decided that really I wasn't good enough. I think we all think we're good at football. And most of us are average and mediocre. And when I was at school, Billy Bremner went to St Modens in Stirling when I went, and little did I know that everybody was going to St Modens with the idea of being the next Billy Bremner. So I wrote this play about how I nearly became, because I played midfield in a trial, and I thought I'd done well, but I didn't really. And what I discovered was that I really didn't have the heart for it. You have to be a midfield dynamo, flame-haired wild man like Billy Bremner. However, when I played in goals, I had all that competitive edge. This is my territory. Don't you dare come in here. I'd fling myself at guys' feet and everything. And I kind of, by failing to be a midfield general, I realised that I was really in my mind, I was a goalkeeper, and it was down to watching wee Ronnie. And that's what the play was about. But it's quite. When you saw it, I mean, it was basically saying it's all right to be mediocre. It's just enjoy the game, just play the game. And we all, I still dream about playing football. Like we need a man, and it's you. And I wake up and I'm knackered because I've been dreaming about running about Celtic Park or Hampden or whatever. So that was great fun. I really enjoyed that.
I think one of the lines around it is that anyone who's ever played football will recognise a wee bit of themselves in that show. And I think the chat is that only football and mediocrity stood between yourself and a career in the game.
That was it. If I'd only recognised that. But at the time, you can't. You just don't get it. You know what I mean? Like you think you're a great player. And I was a bog average. Except when I went into goals, I had the mindset changed, and I was better, and I was better suited to that. And I still play. I'm 68. I sound like one of the old pensioner guys. These old guys you see in the Rep Scotland, and they're 90 odds and they're playing. I'll be one of the guys because I can still manage. Thankfully I can still run about. The joints are still good. The reflexes are still good. And I still play 11 aside in goals, sweeper, keeper, which I loved. I think that's great. That's a great development.
Manuel Neuer of your
God,
day.
I just love it. It's all about concentration. And the every goalie I've ever sat in a plane beside or met at a dinner, I'm always asking them questions. How do you do this? And what makes you do that? And what's your tips for this and what have you? So it's an ongoing thing. I'm still learning. Yeah. And so must mean I'm still hoping that one day somebody's going to the call, you know.
Fingers crossed for
What are
you,
you
Phil.
doing? Can you play
Yeah.
for us, you know?
They say you're a long time retired, so keep it going as long as you
know.
possibly can. Let's talk a wee bit more about comedy and Scottish football before we get to the Celtic stuff. So you'd been doing some comedy writing across the early 80s, naked radio, naked video, that kind of thing, but the big break lands in 1986 with Only an Excuse. It's originally in radio format before it becomes a staple of everyone's hogmanay here in Scotland, and it appeared on the screens between 1993 and 2000, so you know, almost 30 years on the telly as well. Phenomenal stuff. Can you tell us first of all, Phil, how that all came to be?
It was originally it was a parody of Only a Game, which was I think it was 3 or 4 part history of Scottish football, narrated by the late great Willie McIlvanney. And at the time we were doing naked radio, and I was putting in the odd football gag, and it was getting a good response. And I had always thought that football, even people in Scotland that say, oh, I don't know anything about football, they knew about it from the papers. Football was the showbiz of Scotland. That was, you know, everybody knew who managed this and who did that, and who was caught drinking and all that. Everybody knew about this, and I just thought there was a wealth of material that we weren't tapping into. So I went to see the then head of Radio Scotland was a guy called Stan Taylor, and I pitched it. I went and said, Stan, there's a programme called Only a Game. He didn't know anything about football. It's called Only a Game, and I think we could parody it on the radio, make it a naked radio special, Only an Excuse. With Jonathan Watson and Tony Roper, because they're into football and they're good at voices and things like that, and they liked the idea sort of thing. And it literally was, you know, like Stan sitting there smoking his Benson and Hedges, and then going, right, okay, go and commission, go and do it. And it was as simple and easy as that. And we went into a studio, it was a Sunday, went into the radio studio. It was a half-hour show. I think we recorded about 3 hours worth of material, because we just didn't know what we were doing. Just like, I record that. Edited it down, no interference whatsoever, put it out, and it struck a chord, is the way I would put it. I mean, it used to be getting repeated almost every month. One may repeat, another repeat, a Christmas repeat. And then we did a follow-up and so on. So we did the theatre stuff, and then we moved into telly. But that was how it started. Stan had the, I don't know, the courage, or he took a chance on the idea, and it paid dividends.
What do you think it is, Phil, about Scottish football, or maybe more specifically Scottish people and football, that attracts so much humour? It's the kind of stuff, I know there's been I was going to say a version of it down south, but it's not the kind of humour that does carry in England, for example, and I don't know even a bit further afield into Europe, but it seems to work very well in this west of Scotland environment we're in.
I always think the Scottish sense of humour is a humour of survival. You know, like when the chips are down, there's always somebody cracks a gag about it, and you know, releases the tension and what have you. And I just think we take our football more serious than down south, sort of thing. I mean, like, you know, I don't know, but it's a form of insanity, really. I mean, you know, like you can be perfectly sensible, and then 2 o'clock on a Saturday, when it used to be 3 o'clock games, the knot in the stomach, and then you sort of build up to the game, and the talk and the speculation, and then the game kicks off, and that for 90 minutes you lose yourself. And you know, you're shouting at a radio, for goodness sake, and you know, running up and down the lobby in a fit of pique because something that's happened. And at the end of the day, I mean, like, you know, life goes on, you know, but for that 90 minutes and the half hour afterwards and the hour before it, sort of thing, the half hour afterwards, when you try to come to terms with it, and you know, well, getting beat was probably a good result for us today, and all that sort of nonsense that goes with it. But it's the escape from real life. I mean, you know, like, it's that thing, that working class thing back in the day, that, you know, when the factories shut and all that thing, people went in and work the Saturday morning, and then would go to the games, and you'd all these people straight for their work to go to the game for the escape of the harshness of their lives. And footballers, the aristocracy of the working classes, as I heard them described back in the day, that was your escape. And that it certainly has always been my escape. You know, that was.
Do you see football and comedy both as forms of escapism in general?
I think they are, and I think football and comedy are inexorably linked, because you can't tell me you've never been at a game and heard things shouted that made you laugh, and the exasperated comparisons being made, and things that people say. And I always remember there was two guys. Bunch of us used to stand just at the kind of top end of the jungle near the Rangers. That was our bit. And I always remember things about going to games was always having a sore head because of the amount of fag smoke, because it was just gathered in the shed. Everybody smoked. And I always remember there was two guys, and I think it's probably like Jinky or something like that, a world-class player, and he makes a mistake. And one guy said to that guy, he says, that was rubbish. He says, what I would have done, he says, I would have cut inside and squared it to Bobby Murdoch. And the other guy says, no, he says, what you would have done is ran 3 steps and then fell to the ground clutching your chest and has to get taken off. And I thought, that is what would happen for most of it. We would sit and criticise these guys, like we knew better, and that always made me laugh, the idea that we could do better if we were on the park. We'd know how to do it. And one time I was very unfortunate. I played in a charity game at Celtic Park, on Celtic Park, and it's huge. It's like the Sahara Desert or something. I mean, it's miles. The vastness of it. And everybody was knackered because nobody could, even the fitter guys, it took you about 20 minutes to get to the end of the edge of your box, because everything was just much bigger, And
the funny thing is, certainly you and I think, and probably most of the 60,000 folk in Celtic Park every other week, all more or less, to a man, field footballers, to a man and women, field footballers, but experts from the sidelines telling them how to do it. In terms of the only excuse stuff, also, obviously some huge characters in Scottish football, certainly around the 80s and into the 90s, but I have heard you say that things perhaps got a bit harder as you went along due to some big characters maybe leaving the game, and I'm thinking maybe the likes of Kenny Dalglish, Alex Ferguson, William McIlvary that you've mentioned. Do you think there's less characters in Scottish football now than there once were?
Aye, the short answer to that, definitely. I mean, I think the thing, Macca was an absolute godsend, Frank McAvenny. Dennis Law was still active at that time, and there's, the garbled use of the language was we had a lot of fun with that. But it's all a bit more serious now, and controlled and corporate, and there's fewer, I don't know, wild cards, if you like, the guy Mavericks or whatever you want to call them. So it ends up you've got let's say when Fergie's still active, Sir Alex is active, and Sir Kenny or King Kenny, all these different guys are still there, but there's no anybody. There was never anybody coming through behind them, which is probably the reason. It is the reason that we kind of expanded on an excuse, and we brought in politics and things. If we could have stuck purely with football, I think that would have helped. But we just couldn't. There wasn't. Where are we going to get the material from? We need to bring in a wee bit of politics or a wee bit of showbiz and things like that. Keep the thread was still. It was still essentially a football show, but we had to branch out, and ultimately, I think that was, that's my point of view, because I think I wished we could have stuck with just football.
Yeah, but it is hard when there's player interviews today, post match, players and managers. Actually, it's so sanitised and safe and controlled.
And control, yeah, absolutely sanitised, safe, controlled, and they're all kind of they're savvy, they're media savvy.
Yeah. Bring back the dafties, is that what you're saying?
Aye, that's it. It was when it was just like rough and ready, and they were more honest in that sort of, and the thing as well, never forget, they were all good players, these guys. We were, accused, you're taking the piss out of these guys, but we never ever said they were bad players. It was what happened off, it was the daft boy, not the player that we ever focused on.
These guys had a bit of character, but they could also play a bit, and then some. Obviously, a lot of guys will fall into this category. Were you ever worried about offending these guys, or did most of them take it in good humour?
Most of them did. They took it in good humour. It was seen as a kind of badge of honour to be included in it. I mean, I don't privately, maybe they weren't, some of the crueler ones. Although I never ever thought we were particularly cruel. I always felt that if I walked into a room and somebody who had been done was there, okay, I might feel embarrassed. That's fair enough, and I might be wary. Oh, I hope he's all right. But if I genuinely felt uncomfortable, then I'd know I'd crossed the line. Johnny, I think, would say the same. So we always there was a kind of a line that we wouldn't cross. But in terms of their media personality or their persona, we just felt, that was kind of fair game. And we did, when we did the last ever Only an Excuse, which was a kind of semi-documentary thing, Souness and all that, they were all saying, no, they actually loved it. And Souness and his kids were going, he's nailed you. And he's saying, I can't see it. I'm trying to do a Graham Souness here. I'm not as good as John. But, you know, that he's a better player than I first thought and all that kind of thing. And Souness is saying, I'm realising that's exactly what I sound like. Mm-hmm. And when we interviewed him, Souness was trying to do Souness, and Chick was trying to do Chick, and Walter Smith was trying to do Walter Smith. And it's quite funny because, you know, hearing them, how they heard themselves with Johnny doing them, if you know what I mean, if any of that makes sense. So we never ever felt, I never felt bad anyway. But you need to ask them that, you know. Like,
I'm just trying to picture Graham Souness coming runners up in a Graham Souness sound-alike competition.
It's a bit like that. Remember, that was the David Francie one. You know, the old commentator. He entered that's one for the old folks. He entered a David Francie impersonation, and he came competition, and he came second because everybody else could do him better than he did. You know.
Better luck next year, David.
Aye.
I was going to ask, so we're approaching 40 years since the origins of Only an Excuse, 1986. Life's changed a lot since then. The world has changed, you know, in various ways, shapes and forms. But was anything ever off limits at the time? Was there restrictions on you, or were you given carte blanche to go and do as you pleased?
Oh, we were like, on you go, boys. I mean, I cannot, until we went on to telly, and then even initially on telly, it was, you know, you're pretty much left to your own devices. If we needed advice on something, listen, we're not sure. You know, the lawyers, you always get the BBC lawyers. The guys were all right. There was only one guy. It wasn't BBC lawyers, a room full of lawyers going, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And they were usually pretty good at advising us. If not that I can even think of and that we were ever worried about. But as it went on, as the years passed and things changed, there was more involvement from, I don't know, the BBC. Well, he that pays the piper calls the tune. So if they're commissioning the programme, they want input. Mm-hmm. And that's when I used to get a bit, I don't know. I mean, they're just doing their job and I'm just doing mine. But I just thought I was better at the job than they were. Yeah. You know, and just let us get on with it. But it changed. It did change a lot.
The thing for you guys was obviously covering the lighter side of Scottish football and the more humorous side, but obviously there are elements, I suppose they remain to an extent, you know, a kind of darker side of Scottish football, if you like, and you can get into whether it's sectarianism or bigotry or anything of that nature. Did you find it hard to step into those subjects? Did you have to be sensitive to certain folks? Or
well, no, we never were. I've always been comfortable. I don't know, just then jokes about Celtic and Rangers, but the sectarianism, I've always been comfortable doing that because I just felt it was something that needed highlighted and what, you know, like dancing about it and that sort of thing. So we just used to, you know, just go for it, like, you know, Hearts, the cousins of William and all that kind of thing. And when we did all these jokes, the response always told us that people just wanted to laugh at that. You know, there's loads of, you know, there's no loads. There's quite a few plays on the go about that whole sectarian thing, and they're very funny. I'm no Billy, he's a Tim, Des Dillon's thing. It's actually running at the moment.
Yes.
So that the story's never gone away, and people want to hear, you know, jokes about sectarianism and things like that. It's all right to laugh at it. There's a serious side to it, but maybe by laughing at it, we expose it and we can do it. We did a thing when we did the tour. It was when it was Rangers run to the nearly to the Champions League final, and this was at the Pavilion. And Johnny was doing Jim White, and Tony was doing Jerry McNee, and it was basically Jim's going, So Jerry, Rangers ravaged with injuries, but Jerry, they got the result. Yes, and Jerry would respond, and it was like it really was bordering on mass hysteria. The audience laughing, Celtic and Rangers fans just laughing at the media and the fawning over Rangers, because Rangers were in the ascendancy at that time, and I always just felt this is an area that we should be laughing at and pointing it up and seeing how stupid it is, and it still continues to throw up humour. You've got many websites, and all it takes is a bad result or a dodgy steel delivery or something like that, and everybody's there's a pile on at Rangers at the moment. Celtic have had their times as well when it's not been good. And the other thing I always prided myself on was that if Celtic were having a hard time, I could still write jokes about it. And in a funny kind of way, it was cathartic to do that. It wasn't like, right, getting the boot into Rangers. And then when it came to getting the boot into Celtic, oh no, I can't do that, boys. Because I did quite, as I say, it was cathartic. If it was another bad result, I'd go up and get the notebook out and start writing jokes about the bad result, to help me. So it's a therapy there. It's therapeutic as well,
Sounds like it. Phil, who have been your own comedy inspirations over the years? Obviously, you worked with Ricky Fulton, and I know he had a big influence on you. Billy Connolly, of course, you mentioned him at different times as well. But aside from those figures, even, was there anyone in your life perhaps not so famous that you found funny or inspiring?
My Uncle William was very funny. He was good at art and all that kind of thing. He was musical and like that. And he was a performer. He sung with Scottish opera. There's a lot of music growing up in my family. There was always music playing, Mario Lanza and all that kind of thing. A look of blankness comes across.
I'll Google him later on.
Google him later on. With all these 78s and all that thing. That's how old I am. But my Uncle William was very funny, and a tormentor, as we call it. Somebody would wind you up. A wind up was like you were tormented. Stop tormenting him, my granny used to say. My gran, sorry. And I would get caught. William would tell me a story, and it was a lot of rubbish, but I'd end up believing it. And he was very good. And I've always thought that his delivery and all that sort of thing was very funny. I think at the time it was just. My Uncle William, and he was funny, and he was not that much older than me really, but he was very funny. And loads of guys that, where I lived in Kilsyth, the places were full of funny guys. That was their weapon, as I said earlier, to defend themselves against the world, and sitting up in the Celtic club in Kilsyth, and these discussions about should David Bowie be getting paid for re-releasing The Laughing Gnome because he'd done the shift 20 years ago, and it's serious conversations, serious inverted commas, about daft things, and I was always open to that and listened to that, and by getting too deep, by observing how other people behave, you find out what people find funny, and if you can take that and put that in the essence of a joke, then you're a good chance that you get people laughing at it,
Billy Connolly's perhaps the most famous, certainly in this part of the world, for that observational type of comedy. Would he have had a huge impact on what you've done over the years?
Huge. And I remember when the solo concert came out, that had the crucifixion on it and all that sort of thing, and Radio Clyde just used to play it, like 30 minutes long or something like that. You just used to play the routine, like no adverts, and just listen to it. And I don't know, it's hard to imagine Scottish comedy before Connolly. It was Ricky and Jack and Jimmy Logan, Stanley Baxter. These guys, giants, but in a completely different area. And then Connolly appeared and was like speaking in a Glasgow accent, saying things that we understood, observing things that we'd all thought about but never thought to say them. They were funny. And I remember one day, we were out when I worked in the post, I always say the post, it was Scottish Telecommunications Board, St Vincent Street, no far from here, and we were walking up St Vincent Street, and Connolly parked, it was a Merc, and he parked the Merc, and he got out, and he walked across to like a lawyer's office or something like that, and one of the guys went, "Look, there's Billy Connolly," And we all just stood and stared at him. And he kind of nodded, but we just stared at him. It was like this guy had come down from heaven, and here he was on St Vincent Street, dressed in denim with cowboy boots and the long hair and all that kind of thing. And it was like we were rocking out, who is this? Billy looked like an alien, really. And then he did Parkinson, and in a funny kind of way, I felt that's when we lost him. We wanted to keep him. He's ours. He's our secret. But away he went, and he spread his wings, and he's done all the things he's done. And you can still listen to the very early, the Conley LPs, because he used to bring out one every year. I used to get one for my dad for his Christmas, and I can still listen to them and laugh. I mean, laugh out loud. And I know the joke's coming, but the delivery is just astonishing. And then when you see him live, that's when he's brilliant best. Or when he was able to, and that ability to speak to an audience, thousands in an audience, but it's to you he's speaking. It's everybody individually is part of the conversation, and that you're born with that. That's just unique, totally.
The crucifixion you mentioned is just an incredible piece of writing, and it's I think Pastor Jack Lass was too fond of it at the time.
He didn't like that.
It was it's something, and you can still get that. That's on Spotify, I think, even if you just search for that. Out with your stargazing moment on St Vincent Street. Did you bump into him over the years? Would you have had any?
I've been in his company a few times. I wouldn't say I know him. I mean, I'm not a mate or a pal or anything like that. I've been in his company, and when I used to work up at when I was dubbing at American Americans, the dubbing studio, Billy was in there quite a lot, and so we just have how you getting on, how you doing. It was just small talk, and he had big pals with Tony Roper,
right?
And at Edinburgh Festival, we were doing Naked Radio at the Fringe, and Billy was there, and I had a couple of blairs with him there and that, but it's a long time. I'll tell you the last time I spoke to Billy was when the day we stopped the 10.
May 98.
May 98. I had done a job for Celtic, and he said, well, listen, we'll get a couple of tickets. When you and I'd got tickets for the last game of the season, St Johnstone, because I thought it would all be over by then. Of course, it wasn't. It was the big one, and we were in the front. And it was me, my son, Russell Kyle, who's pally with Billy, and Billy, and that was the four of us sitting there. And of course, when Harold Bratback scored the goal, it was a pylon. I was just I remember looking up and seeing pairs of specs flying. Everybody's specs were coming off and everything, and we were up in the back of people, and you were lying on the ground and everything. And I looked over, and there Philip would be about 8 at the time, jumping, hugging Billy Connolly, And I thought, there's something I never thought I'd see,
It's a brilliant memory to have.
Oh God, aye.
Phil, obviously, we're about half an hour in here, and I've been calling you Phil Differ all the while, but actually it should be Dr. Philip Differ. I do apologise. So you received
you're forgiven.
an honorary doctorate from Glasgow Cali Uni in 2018. You've described that as a really proud and humbling moment for you, and I've seen your acceptance speech from the day itself, and it actually looks quite emotional for you. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It was. Well, if you've ever seen, let me jump back. If you've ever seen the documentary about the Lisbon Lions, you'll know that I greet quite a lot. And that moment, I don't know. I think it was because when I went, I underachieved at school. I should have done better. I wasn't. At primary, I was fine. I was clever, and I got prizes, and I was always second in class. I never toppled Anne-Marie Hines in all the years. She was always first. But when I went to secondary, you discover all these different temptations and sidelines and things like that. And I never ever worked. And when I went to college, I went as a mature student. I was 24 at the time, 1980, and it was a 2-year course, etc., and that kind of thing. And when it came to the doctorate, it was, I don't know, it was like what I was going to get a chance. What I should have done when I was, when I was younger. I worked really hard at college, and I passed all the exams I needed to pass, and that was a moment. I met a guy. My lecturer there was a guy called Ian Mowat, and Ian was great. Ian sort of took me under his wing, and he was a comedy writer as well, and he showed me things and that kind of thing, and pushed me out. That was the single most biggest decision in my life was was to go to college. It was absolutely crucial. None of this would have I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, because I would have ended up in Kilsyth probably driving a van or something. Not there's anything wrong with driving a van, but it was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be creative and what have you. So in response to your question, it was very emotional. Actually, it was mainly ad-libbed, because I had it all planned out what I was going to say, and it was awful po-faced. And then at the last minute, you can see I've got a bit of paper and I'd scribbled some notes on it. I'm doing it. It was something like 10 minutes for her speech, and it just like I was just dead. I was proud, humbled and proud at the same time, you know.
Yeah, I watched it just the other night, and just as you say, you've got the notes. I think about 3/4 way through, I think they get discarded, and you just kind of speak more openly from the heart. I mean, was there anything or maybe anyone at that time that you're maybe thinking of that made you so emotional?
Oh, my mammy, I suppose. My dad was still alive at that time, but he couldn't figure it out. What do you mean you're a doctor? You know, I says, well, I can't sign lines and things like that. It's to do with my work. It's a recognition of my work, which and so you're a doctor, aye. So he was telling her, that's who Philip, a doctor now. It did get me into trouble once. Tim Cowan, great idea. I'm doctor on my passport, right? He said you can do that. It's, even though it's an honorary doctorate, you can call yourself. So I checked on it, and Tam says, I put it on because you'll get upgraded on planes all the time. Well, all that happened was that there was somebody who took no well on a plane, and they approached me. To cut a long story short, understand you're a doctor, and I'm going, I'm not that kind of, but you're a doctor. I am a doctor, but I'm a doctor of letters, and they couldn't get it at all. So I wasn't able to help the person.
Some guys having a heart attack and you're cracking jokes.
Well, it was basically that. I says I can tell them jokes, but I said I can't cure them, and then like that, they carted off the plane, and I was just left sitting there. My wife looking at me. I told you not to do it. You know.
So moving on, Doctor. So you're a young lad in the 60s, Phil, a time that coincides with the greatest era in Celtic's history. Tell us, and you've mentioned the documentary, and I've seen your piece in the brilliant Lisbon documentary, but tell us your earliest memories of Celtic and of the Lions.
The first game I ever went to, the first Celtic game I ever attended was it was Celtic versus Clyde, 66, 67. See, I think it was a League Cup. Remember, we used to read groups. Big team, they still do that, but the big teams were, and it was Celtic beat Clyde 8-0, and Jim Murphy had Bobby Lennox in the sweepstake. I always remember that, and he won 5 shillings or something like that, and the supporters bus. But I remembered that, and then there's a kind of thing that the European Cup thing. I think we just expected the run to Lisbon. I think we just expected a whole day all right. But, it's sort of Zurich, and then Nantes, and then it was Vojvodina Novi Sad, which Tommy Gemmell told me, he says that was the best team that they played in the entire run, including Inter Milan. And that was the game. I was at that game. We were talking earlier about false memories and that, but I definitely was at that. I can remember that game because I can remember it was one each, and back in the days there wasn't any extra time of penalties. It would be a replay at I think it was Rotterdam had been selected. Yep. And in the final 90 minutes, and then again back in the days, they didn't hold up a thing and say 7 minutes. You had no idea how long it was going to be played, and everybody's looking at their watches, and everybody's watches is slow and fast, nothing like that. And Celtic got a corner, and there were other things I remember. They were all green that night. They were green that because Novi Sad had a Vojvodina was white with a kind of sash thing doing it, and Charlie Gallagher corner, and Big Billy, one of the classic Billy floats up in the air and bullets it into the back of the net. And what I always remember, there's a famous picture from behind the goals, is the Novi Sad, the Vojvodina defender with his hand, number 6.
Yeah.
his hand up. Their goalkeeper was a guy called Pantelic, who was a really highly rated Yugoslavian goalkeeper. And Celtic's equaliser, it was a shot, I think it was Tommy Gemmel's shot, and he spilled it, and Stevie Chalmers just tapped it in. And I remember that being an easy goal. And then for the rest of the second half, it was like Celtic battering. And then that relief and release thing when they scored. I actually think the referee, they kicked off for after the goal, and the referee then blew the whistle, and that was that. But everybody just got a big cheer, and then everybody went home. There wasn't like singing and walking around the park and all that kind of thing. And that was the thing when I think we all started to think, actually we could do this, we could win. And then Dukla Prague, I nearly said Dukla Pomfrey, then Dukla Prague, and then Milan itself, and that they never, you just anybody who was there or who watched it will ever forget that. I mean, that was the moment, the defining moment.
Yeah, absolutely. The game in Lisbon, something like a 5 o'clock kickoff, wasn't it?
It was, aye.
Where did you watch that?
I watched it in 9 Johnson Avenue, Kilsyth. My dad was working. He'd left the pits. And he was working. He was a greenkeeper at Billita Golf Course, and he was working overtime that night, so he wouldn't be able to see the game. Right. So he was out cutting grass and things like that, and there was no transistor. He didn't have one. So he literally came in the door and I told him, that Celtic had won. And my dad was of that generation that you didn't show your feelings, so you carried on, oh, that's good and all that. But that day, he had this big smile on his face. I mean, it was just like, I'd never seen him out of a football match, certainly, to be so happy. He was so happy at that moment. And all the neighbours were out with glasses of whiskey and all that, and the Celtic dish towel, you remember the dish towel? Guys running about stopping buses with the dish towel and everything. And now information is instant. Within a minute what the score was, who scored. Then it wasn't even folk going, what was the score? What was the score? And guys are shouting out buses and lorries and everything like that. And to be fair, even the boys in Kilsyth, even my Blue Nose pals, my Rangers supporter, they kind of had just horns up, what can you say kind of thing. And they took the slagging, obviously, and that was they just had to laugh and say, oh well, fair enough.
Do you think you, Phil, your pals, your dad, your Uncle Willie, all of these folks at the time realised the enormity of what Celtic had achieved?
There was almost a sense that Steen was invincible, and whatever he just seemed to know how to figure it out, and the team reflected that. There was a gallousness about Celtic, an arrogance about them. They were good and they knew they were good. And I also remember like European nights, because of the amount of smoke, cigarette smoke, kind of haze under the floodlights, in the theatre almost. Yep. And then when Celtic would run out, most time with all against Vojvodina, it was all green, but that white was so white, it was like obviously Oxidol and Daz and all these things they were, but they always looked fantastic when they ran out. And there was that kind of, I don't know, I just never ever doubted it. I mean, I was only, I think 6, 7, only 11 at the time. And you don't think your teams are ever going to, you just take every game as going to be, going to be a victory sort of thing. But there was on the day of the final, I mean, until when Inter Milan scored, that was the first time it dawned on me that, hey, maybe we will need one. But then, when you watch it back and you see the pummeling, the inevitable was coming, but at the time when you're emotional. But I remember the frustration of the Inter Milan goalkeeper, Sarti. It was outstanding. He was like one-handed saves and all these kind of thing, and the frustration was growing and growing and growing. They say Sarti was like the Phil Differ of his day. Yes, and that was if only.
Would you have been at Celtic Park when they came back with the trophy?
I wasn't there. No, I don't know why, but I definitely wasn't there. Right. And when you look at that, it was like a coal lorry, wasn't it?
Exactly what it was.
And the Coatbridge accordion band and all that sort of thing, and there it was, the European Cup getting marched around. 4 sheds basically,
So my dad was there. He living around about 16 at the time, and he was there with my Uncle James and various others. I've got a good friend, a really good friend of mine, a guy called Stephen Cushley, and his dad was John Cushley.
John,
who
aye.
You maybe remember was...
I do. I met John once at a dinner, aye.
And John's big misfortune was being understudy to Billy McNeil, no less, and that's just a thankless task. But he was, of course, part of that squad, part of that team. He was certainly in Lisbon. And he was on that float, so if you see the pictures, of the trophy getting paraded.
I remember him well.
And I just think, what a moment. It's a huge moment for Stephen and the family and all that stuff, but just for John Cushley to be a part of that and to be just there and around those special players at that special time is phenomenal stuff.
Okay.
I was going to ask, so I'm born in the 80s, Phil, I'm 81, but like anyone, Celtic minded, you're submerged in stories of the Lions from a very young age. Fans of your generation and my dad that I mentioned were lucky enough to see these guys in the flesh, and I was just going to ask, were they really as good as they were made out to be?
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
I reckon there was 3 world-class players in the team, Gemmell, Murdoch and Johnson, and the rest of them weren't kicking the arse off that. I would have put it. It's that thing, there was individual brilliance there, but they were a team as well. And if you think about it, I was looking at the way they lined up. It was 4-2-4 used to be Celtic's kind of favourite, and so Alden, Murdoch, 2 guys running midfield. Midfield would usually be 3 at that time. 4-4-2 came later, I think. But they could dominate. There's so much space there, and you think about it. You give guys like Murdoch and all space, they're going to exploit it, and they did. And we were fast. And we were hard, we were tough. Okay, occasionally we lose the rag against Racing Club and things like that. And as Big Yogi remember saying to me, he says, when Yogi hit the goalkeeper, he says, I honestly thought I was going to get away. Nobody's looking, just everybody in the cameras and all that kind of thing. But no, they were good. They were great. They were great. I mean, they've proved that. They've nothing for them to prove. They did it.
Yeah. You mentioned Ronnie Simpson as a real hero of yours growing up. Was there anyone else either from the Lions or any era of Celtic that you really admired?
Murdoch. Herrera said before the Inter Milan game, he says, when Murdoch plays, Celtic play. And that's I get bloody emotional when I talk about these guys. Before that, you can cut out that gap. Before that, Celtic were basically rotten. I mean, a Scottish Cup final against Dunfermline. That was arguably the single most important goal. That changed that thing.
65.
And here we were in the European Cup final, and and winning it, for God's sake. And all these guys, working class. Where I go. It's a really weird thing that how I get emotional about when I talk about that. Just a bunch of working class boys, Jim Baxter said, a bunch of boys from Baillieston and Uddingston and Saltcoats winning the European Cup. I mean, doesn't get any better than that.
You say you're a very young man when it happens. You're 11 years of age, Phil, and then through what you do, through your working life, you get to meet some of these guys at dinners and various events across the years. What's it like to have spoken and spent time in the company of those Celtic heroes?
Well, you're just in awe of them, basically, and without exception, they were all incredibly humble and ordinary guys, and hearing Bobby Lennox saying, I just didn't think I was good enough. And you think, God, if you could only have come up and sat beside us and watch yourself. And Bobby and Murdoch, Tommy Gemmell. I think the only one I haven't met was Willie Wallace. I think that's the only one. I saw him from afar, but I didn't meet him. And Bertie went over to the Celtic North American Vegas thing, the rallies that
convention,
they have. Convention, that's the word I'm looking for. And so I got to know Bertie, although he never ever mastered my name. He just used to always call me Biggin. You all right, Biggin? and listening to guys like that, and Bertie was the king of Celtic Park. I mean, Bertie walked up Kerrydale Street and there was like everybody, you know, like, I mean, what is that? Charisma by the bucket load, you know, and he took that onto the park. So when you met guys like that, you know, it's just like fantastic. Ronnie Simpson, lovely guy. Jim, I mean, I don't want to leave names out. Stevie Chalmers, what a gentleman Stevie was as well. Me Jinky was like, you know, wild card and singing and all that kind of thing. It's just great just to be in their company kind of thing. Back in the days, it was you got autographs. But he didn't. That was just to remind you to prove that I did actually see this guy. You know, I was actually there. He did sign that, but just to be around him it's incredible. You know.
You mentioned earlier about showbiz wise, maybe and some of the TV stuff you've done over the years. Maybe at times it's not great to meet your heroes, and you've had some kind of interesting experiences there. But was this the opposite? Was this a real
absolutely? No, genuinely. Evan Williams, Dixie Deans, Joe McBride, John Fallon, they were all there. Kenny Dalglish. I must say, with Dalglish, I was slightly in awe. I was like, what am I going to say here? You know, like kind of lost for words. Because Dalglish, when he signed for Celtic and he farmed out to Cumbernauld, and Cumbernauld United didn't have a football park. They played in St Pat's Sports Ground in Kilsyth.
Okay.
So to be a rebel, I supported Cumbernauld because it was Kilsyth Rangers, of which I am an honorary president of Kilsyth Rangers. Okay. So there you go. I crossed all the barriers, all the boundaries. And Kenny used to play on this, I don't know, ploughed field. And I used to watch him there, and you know, you just knew, God, this guy's going to Celtic. Honestly, people say that you see him, you could tell he was, you know, but you could tell. I mean, he was just unbelievable. Trapping the ball, passing the ball to men, you know, 1-2s. No, I think this is junior football on a crew field, a paddock basically. But it was years and years. It was only a few years ago when I met Ken Dalglish, and he's very ordinary. He's an incredibly ordinary guy. And I talked to him about that, and he remembered some of the guys that played at that time and everything.
I mean, there's you meeting your hero Kenny Dalglish in the 70s, and lo and behold, I don't know, 15 years later, you're taking the piss out of him and an excuse.
I know. But he was great as well. He was trying to do. He was doing him because he was saying, "Ask me a question." So we'd ask the question, and he'd go, "Maybe it's aye, maybe it's not." And so he was doing with a completely straight face, which was quite surreal, but it was very, very funny.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, we've spoken there about, you know, Jockstein and the Lions and everything that goes with that, but there's plenty of big moments for Celtic, you know, beyond that era. There's the Quality Street Gang, of which Kenny Dalglish is very much part of, centenary team in the 80s. We can definitely skip the 90s if you want to do so. And then everything after that, Martin O'Neill up to more recent times. Any special moments or memories amongst those times?
I think I mentioned earlier when Celtic stopped the 10.
Yeah.
I think because my boy was with me. That's one of the kind of we were there sort of moments, you know. That was because the consequences, if we hadn't, you know, it was like didn't bear thinking about. And you know that moment, I think the one the Albert Kidd one was one because I was at a wedding. I was at a wedding in the Kirk, and there was me and another guy, but the only Celtic fans, and the conversation was along the lines of, "Oh God, I've just heard they bastards have won the league," and we're like going, "Aye, is that right? Oh, terrible," and that kind of thing. That was a good moment. Any time Henrik Larsson got the ball was a great moment. Seville was. I wasn't in Seville. I was working in a programme at the time. That was so bittersweet that Larsson scored 2 world-class goals. See, the first one in particular, was an astonishing goal, and we got nothing. And that's football. You know, it can be the beautiful game, can be the cruel game as well. And that was. But again, as I said earlier, we were doing a radio show the next day. And it was a really funny radio show because I got all I used that as my catharsis was to write about the disappointment of it, and we had a really good show out of that. And then after it was finished, then you start doing the pain of it. But you know, I remember a game. A thing that kind of taught me a lesson. I mean, I remember a game Celtic had got beaten 4 or 5 Wanby Rangers or something. I think it was at Ibrox, and it was 1-0. I think Tory Andre Fro was playing. I might be getting the timeline mixed up.
Yeah, you're right.
But the Monday, I was having lunch in Byres Road, as we do, as West End types. Although I don't live in the West End. And Jos Valharen walked in, so maybe it wasn't, maybe it was later that, and him and his girlfriend walked in, and they were smiling and laughing, and I remember thinking, how can he be smiling and laughing having get beat the previous day? And I thought, well, no, because life goes on, and it's back to what I was saying, it's mad for that time, the 90 minutes, etc. But you've got to get on with your life. I mean, you can't be sitting, especially if you're Jos Valharen, you're going to be playing on Wednesday, and you can't be going, don't feel like it, we get beat, So
I wonder if Jos Valharen's on a podcast in Belgium somewhere talking about that time he seen Phil Differ on Byres Road.
And what I was eating.
You've mentioned Seville. Seville's an interesting one, isn't it? It's 21 years or so ago, and despite the result and the pain, the heartbreak of the result, it's still one that's looked back on so fondly. And obviously Tony Roper had to play Seville, and it's one that we do look back on with fondness, even though the result didn't go our way. What about modern day Celtic, Phil, and modern day football? Do you have as much love for it as you did when you were trying to be that Billy Bremner wee guy?
Well, probably no, but I say that, but when the referee blows for the kick-off, then so you can criticise it and say it's not as good, it's not as this, it's not, they're fitter, but they're not as clever, and etc. They're not got the personalities, and I can criticise it all I want, but I know that when the referee blows the whistle and the game kicks up, everyone else goes out the window, and it's a bizarre sort of way. When I'm watching it, I am imagining and I'm remembering the Lions and the Stoke and the 10 and the teams for the 60s, 70s and the 80s. There's bits of that fleet in and out my head. He wouldn't have done that. He should have done. If only we had so-and-so and all that kind of thing. But you've only ever got the 11 guys plus the subs that you've got, and you've just got to get behind them. It's all about the jersey. I mean, honestly, if it was, I don't know, 11 Diddy's playing for Celtic, and we've had close to that in the past. We've had it doesn't matter. You still, it's the jersey. It's the hoops.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of answered my next question, but I was going to ask, can you get every bit as excited about a Kyogo, a Jota, a Kieran Tierney as you once did about a Jinky, a Bertie Auld, a Bobby Murdoch?
Once the game kicks off, absolutely, because they're the guys that have got to do it. They're the guys that have got to win it, and that 100% support of that, absolutely.
What do you make of the current Celtic, and are you a fan of Brendan Rodgers?
Aye, I think so. I think he's trying to do something, and what I would like to think was that we were thinking beyond Scotland and think like how do well in Europe, because I think it was last year Brendan Rodgers said something that very true, and it rung true. He was like, for too long we've just thought, well, we've qualified, we'll see what happens, and usually it's a disaster, a couple of bad disaster. We should be getting into Europe. I'd like to be getting into Europe thinking that we can do something. Now, bringing in Schmeichel and the young guy, Sinisolo. That's quite good, I got that right. That shows up that there's planning there. Mm-hmm. And I think, well, that's good. Can we do that with the defence, and can we do it with the midfield? Can we do it up? And if that's the plan, and given the money that we have, speculate to accumulate. I know it's Scottish footballers know the standard there was in terms of the other teams, the opposition, but it's still there. You still got to beat these teams, and if you turn up with the wrong attitude, you'll get a fright every now and again. So I'm not worried about that. I think that'll take care of itself. I would like us to look to Europe a wee bit more, and if are we running, just win a couple of games, be in with a shout. Nobody think, right, we've got to win all our games and they've got to lose all their games. After 2 games we're chasing our tails. I wish we could avoid that, know.
I think some of those, the most special memories for any Celtic fan across the ages, obviously you've got Lisbon, and we're envious of that, but younger fans have maybe got a Seville or even beaten Barcelona more recently. The European nights are something special, and they're synonymous with Celtic, and I think all of us just hope we can get back to at least being competitive on that front.
Aye. And it's not that long ago, like Barcelona beating Barcelona and teams like that. And I think if the board were to back Rodgers, I think he would deliver that. the couple. I must admit, I had a couple of wobbles last season. I think we all did. It's just the idea of the unthinkable, and that. But they came through that. You know, they battled through that. And as I said to you, it doesn't matter who's playing. I look down and you see the guys in the hoops and they're running about like that. That's good enough for me, you know.
Yeah, and here's hoping they can kick on under Brendan Rodgers.
Absolutely.
Do you still make it along, Phil, to the games?
I've not been. I was a few games last year, but not as many as I used to do. I've become very lazy.
You don't just flash your doctor's ID or
no,
anything?
I don't. I always remember one time when the only excuse was kind of, I used to get invited to corporate people would come to their boxes and things like that, which was easier because they would send a taxi and all that. I was getting a bit up myself at that point. And I remember one time I was standing inside Celtic Park, getting in, and Hugh Keevans, I heard a voice behind me saying, "So Phil, going in with the fat cats," which is basically what I'd been slagging off.
Yeah.
I had, and I was aware of that. I thought, oh no, he's right.
Poacher
he's
turned
right.
gamekeeper.
I know. But you go down that. You do go down that wee route, you know. You can't help it, you know. It's nice that whole thing. But I just like, I like football. I just like watching the game. You know, I've got pals and that. We occasionally go to the game, just sit there, and it's like that guy. What I would have done is this. No, what you would have done is clutched your chest and fell to the ground. That we're at that stage now, you know, or he is. I like to think I could run a few steps before I did that, you know.
68-year-old whippersnapper.
I know. That was it.
What keeps you busy these days, Phil? Are you working on anything in particular at the moment? And I was going to ask, would you ever write anything specifically about Celtic? You've obviously done Celtic and Rangers type stuff over the years from the comedy angle, but would you ever do anything Celtic focused?
There's a possibility of something against these things. You can't say too much about these things. There's a wee project that nearly came to fruition last year, and it might still, which it pertains to Celtic. It's comedy, obviously. And then there's 2 plays in current at the moment, and I'm working on a novel as well at the moment, and still doing stand up. Telly and radio, I think that part's. I've done that now, and I kind of want to try and do some other things and just expand writing prose as opposed to dialogue. But theatre's good. I like theatre as well. I mean, I've done a couple of things there. And it'd be good to do some more of them. I
was going to ask if, long, successful career at this stage, do you have any thoughts of hanging up the pen as such, or do you think you'll always write regardless?
I couldn't do that.
No.
Do you know, I couldn't. Honestly, I've got in my jacket, there's always a notebook and about 3 pens in case that one runs out. And I'm always scribbling down an idea here, an idea there. Some of it might come to fruition, some of it will be used in something, or some might develop into a bigger idea. But it's just a writer's thing, you know. It's just that you do that, you can't help doing that.
Is it just a natural thing for a writer to look for inspiration in everyday life? Is that
you're
part
walking
of it?
down, something happens and you go and scribble that down. And as I say, it might be in a stand-up routine, it might be a joke in a script that I've been working on, it might be something that never sees the light of day. But you get into that habit.
What about the stand-up? Just to touch on that briefly as we start to close out, Phil. That's, I suppose, a more recent-ish part of your career. Maybe 2005, I think you started that.
I was 47 when I did my first gig. So 21 years I've been doing that now.
How do you find it? Is it a buzz?
Aye, it is. It's the show off in me, the ego thing. Like stand-ups, we're all gamblers. We're gambling that they'll like us and they'll like our jokes. And most of the time you walk out and you get the right response. But every now and again you've got to dig in, as they say, the comedy equivalent of Ross County on a wet Tuesday night sort of thing. But I love it. I enjoy it. The thing I enjoyed, it was Fred Macaulay called my bluff one. Fancy being a stand-up. Right, okay, bluff called, Tuesday night, come to the stand in Edinburgh, day 5 minutes. You'll know in that 5 minutes if that's what you want to do or no. And I did it, and I knew I wanted to do it. And that was it. The thing about being stand-up is the freedom. You can go in there and say whatever you want. You have to accept the consequences if you go too far, if you say the wrong thing, if you say something that's a bit dodgy or shady or anything like that. But generally speaking, it's free of being instructed by script editor, commissioning editor, producer, whatever. Like you just go out and do it, what you find funny. And I know I love it. So it's good.
What have you got the biggest kick from over the years? Is it getting a laugh at a stand-up gig? Is it seeing some of your writing, make it big on the screen, even some of the audio stuff you done in the earlier years?
The first time I ever saw my name on the telly was in a kick up the 80s. It was a sketch, The Deck of Cards. Robbie Coltrane as Ian Paisley doing The Deck of Cards, and everybody was talking about it, and you see your name written by, and my name just happened to be at the top, and probably alphabetical, and it was like, wow. I mean, that was the moment. That was the bit. There's other things. Only an excuse. I'm so proud of that. That's the thing. That before it there was nothing, and then it appeared, and then it had a great life and that sort of thing. But that moment when you see your name on the telly for the first time is that was, and the fact that it was Robbie Coltrane that was in the sketch, you know, who was brilliant. That's the one. That's the moment probably of them all when you think I could do this.
Yeah, that was the penny dropped for you.
I could actually, you know, if I approach this properly, treat it as a job, and that's it. I could do this, and when you whatever it is you want to do in your life, when you get that opportunity to do it, it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
So you got to keep pushing for it, whatever it is. You don't say, folks say, it's very difficult. Of course it's difficult, or everybody would be doing it. But you're just listening and learning and pushing yourself that wee bit all the time, you know.
And some 44 odd years later, you're still doing it, Phil.
Still doing it, aye.
Final question for you. What are your future hopes for Celtic, and what's your future hopes for Phil Differ?
For Celtic, they're intertwined. No, for Celtic, it's the number of consecutive league titles. Every one's a separate one for me. At the start of every season, greedily I want to win everything, including every game, every throw in, every corner, every shot. I just want to win everything, and that I want to see that continuing. And I'd like to just make a dent in Europe. It'd be great to make a dent in Europe. Just a start, just to see something starting there. That would be good. And for me, just to maintain my faculties on the football field, not to sprain or dislocate any more fingers. I've done enough of that. Keep playing in goals and keep writing. Just keep writing and looking for the next idea. Yeah,
just keep doing what you're doing. Phil, it's been a genuine pleasure to have you here on the Celtic Exchange.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for sharing your stories of a life in writing, a life in Scottish football, and a life in Celtic, and best of luck for whatever comes next.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil.